Deleted session, January 28, 1981. Good evening. Now, your documentary rather neatly shows two portions of the world mind operating at odds, rather than in complementary ways, almost as if they were surgically separated, or somehow functionally impaired, as in many ways they have been through misunderstandings throughout the years. Both portions of this world mind or world brain, therefore, operate in exaggerated fashions, so that their own characteristics are almost caricatured, untempered, as it were by other portions, as if perhaps in an individual the left and right portions of the brain were artificially, functionally separated. What is perfectly clear to one portion of that world brain may not be perceived at all by the other side, and vice versa. For the purposes of this discussion, we must simplify. So we will say that, generally speaking, your own country allies itself with the world of reason, while in the same fashion, Iran allies itself with the world of emotion. Both react, again, by exhibiting exaggerated versions of the characteristics involved. However, the same applies in any personality who attempts to separate the intellect and the emotions from their necessary unity within psychological structure. In either case, you end up with the need for negotiators who attempt to bring the two sides into at least some alignment, or to correct the vision and the perception of each side until the situation of the other side is at least perceived with some clarity. Now, under many situations, people again behave in the same manner. They use portions of themselves as hostages, or as in Ruber's case, they use a portion of themselves not so much as hostages, but they take a part of the self under protective custody. This almost always occurs when there are misunderstandings in particular areas between the picture of the self or the world as painted by the intellect and the picture of the world or of the self painted by the emotions. At the basis of almost all problems of any nature, there is a point where value fulfillment is being denied. The point is not so much to search for what is wrong, but to discover what expression is denied, even while it is sought for. That is, the individual has a problem because there is a blockage of value fulfillment in a given area. The person seeks a certain kind of expression, while also feeling that the same expression is either dangerous, forbidden, or, for one reason or another, impossible to achieve. This applies to human personal problems and to political ones in which entire peoples are involved. Many of the methods used to find situations actually involve the setup of negotiations on the part of nations. The third party or parties, who in the beginning can communicate with each side, explaining one side's viewpoint to the other. The setting up of communication with individuals, communication between the various portions of the self, is highly desirable then. This is often accomplished quite automatically as other portions of the self form themselves into negotiative postures, inserting various thoughts and ideas and feelings to the opposing psychological camp. Ruber took a portion of himself into protective custody, not wishing to do that portion any damage, but simply to restrain it, to teach it discipline. Some people take portions of themselves again as hostages, restraining such portions with the idea of punishing them for imagined wrongs, or for actions not understood. In either case, however, portions of the self are hampered, restrained, and their expression drastically reduced, and there are bound to be repercussions. Rupert's body suffered whether or not he intended it to, because value fulfillment was being further denied. In the case of hostages and those in protective custody, a certain kind of enforced isolation is also bound to happen, and to some degree or another, the individual involved will display in certain areas the same kind of exaggerated patches between various portions of the self, as the Americans and the Iranians display in their behavior together. One side will be unable to see or understand the behavior of the other side. Each will seem foreign to the other. The American response, generally not speaking, to Iranian emotionalism is to become still more self-righteously reasonable, cooler, more superior. The Iranian's response to the American's reason involves new outbursts of emotionalism and behavior that appear oddly irrational to the American view. So we are often indeed faced with a lack of communication between various portions of the self, or between various portions of the world. In between, you have the nation's concerns about world approval or disapproval, and endless versions of face-saving devices. With the individual, of course, you have personal versions of the same issues. Rupert's intellect and his emotions, working together, work joyfully in his writing, his psychic endeavors, and his subjective experience in general. They unite and stimulate his creative abilities so that he does what comes naturally, easily, and vitally to him, searching out his own view of reality. But in certain areas, the intellect and the emotions begin to separate in their visions of the picture of the world. The intellect disapproves of certain feelings and emotions because the intellect, allied with the social aspects of reality, thinks in terms of a public face or respectability of its position with other adults in the world. Some of this is difficult to clarify because affairs are not really all that clearly cut. When united, the intellect and the intuitions do well. The intellect, however, wants the emotions to be perhaps more respectable than they are, neater, held better in check, well dressed. It wants approval from the world. In Rupert's case, it began to worry that the exuberant, spontaneous, emotional parts of the self will allow their search for truth and creativity to get out of bounds, bringing some danger, perhaps, rather than honor, or at the very least, scorn and criticism. Over a period of time, you ended up with two exaggerated portraits, artificial ones, with the spontaneous elements of the personality straining for the full use of their abilities, and the reasoning one determined to pursue such endeavors. But with caution, the intellect's reasons, however, were not entirely its own, but only appeared to be, because the opposing camps were so out of communication. The intellect actually quite unknowingly made those reasoning deductions on an emotional basis from an outdated picture of the world, held jointly by emotions and intellect years ago in Rupert's childhood. By the very fact that a portion of the self is kept, say, in a sort of protective custody, it is kept in isolation, which means that it is not kept up on current events. Like political hostages, it does not get all of the mail, or the mail it does get is apt to be censored. So it is not operating with a full set of facts. That alone, of course, prolongs the difficulty. The portions of the self kept in protective custody develop certain characteristics just to get by. modes of behavior that perhaps serve to take off some of the pressure, while ever seeking ways to escape the situation. This applies to all such instances, of course. We are now involved with reassuring Ruber that it is safe to move, and ultimately that it is safe to relax. We are trying to reassure him that relaxation is indeed a part of a creative process, and that it also makes all other motion possible. Such a statement can be accepted by all portions of the self, but it must be emphasized time and time again. In the meantime, there can seem to be other reasons, different ones, that crop up to make his attitudes seem more rational. These are part of the modes of behavior adopted by the portion of the self held in custody, so to speak. At any given time, when he may not feel it right to relax, because he has such and such a chore to perform, or because of the hour, or for any reasons that will all serve to hide the fact that he is afraid of relaxing. He fears relaxing because then he will do nothing, but instead he is afraid of letting go because he fears he will go too far and put himself in an unsafe position in the world. Some of your own earlier attitudes should help you relate to that kind of rationale. When you spoke to him this afternoon, telling him it was safe to relax, you helped break his isolation. The person held in protective custody had someone to talk to, and another party to help in the negotiations. A trusted party, a highly important point, because the two of you are so involved. Your own position is bound to change, and in years previous, to some extent now, you also felt that certain portions of Ruber's personality should indeed be held in protective custody. For some time you were alarmed only because the treatment given that portion was more severe than you thought it should be. Now you are actively acting as a trusted party, working for the release of the portion held in relative captivity, and your assurances at this point can be extremely important. Ruber has also managed to set up a better system of communication, and whenever you begin to pay more attention to your impulses again, you are bound to get off center at any point. You begin to change the situation. Your impulses immediately begin to broaden your picture of reality, to uncensor the male, so to speak. Ruber will naturally seek your aid, however, and your helpful hand as he moves out of those limited corridors of activity, and so he is. End of session. Ra said yes. They said and found good evening. Ra said thank you very much, said good night.